Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to HitScan. Today we are talking about Sigma, specifically the question, why wasn't he nerfed? Sitting down with both pro like Crow and Argay, I think we've got a fair few reasons as to why it might be the case, and a change somewhat in Blizzard's balanced philosophy perhaps. I think we also go into detail in a big problem that I feel Sigma has that none of the other tanks really suffer from either, which makes it almost impossible for Blizzard to balance for him really. Before that though, I did want to shout out HyperX. We have been working with them for quite some time. Myself and Miska use all of their peripherals, mouse, keyboard, headset. I even have some HyperX RAM that I use. We'll talk a bit more about the headsets in the end of this video, but just wanted to shout them out quickly here. But first, let's go over the most notable reason as to why Sigma wasn't nerfed.
Because D.Va was buffed. That's why Sigma wasn't nerfed. I don't know why Sigma wasn't nerfed, but by them trying to get another off tank, like basically they want Orisa in there and they're fine with Orisa, or they want Reinhardt in there, but it's a secondary tank that they kind of, I really think they're trying to they hope everyone's going to play like anchor tank as they call them, and then an off tank, and then maybe they're just pushing for that. Maybe they're pushing for Sigma to be an off tank, and as D.Va gets better, well, then she becomes a new off tank. So we'll see less Sigma. I don't know. The D.Va change, well, 2-second boosters, obviously, there's jokes that, D.Va is a fat Genji, and now, she's kind of becoming a fat Pharah. But with that change, it kind of states that they're trying to get D.Va more in the game, and essentially Sigma out of the game more. The problem is I don't see that change really getting Sigma into light anymore. D.Va into the game and Sigma out of the game, and it's because of the lack of Sigma balance changes that it really kind of has me concerned as well. So while the D.Va change itself doesn't worry me, it's the fact that they're kind of refusing to nerf Sigma right now and trying to get D.Va into the game more with a buff.
Now, I imagine everybody's reaction about this is going to be relatively the same. Simply put, that seems like such a small change to Sigma that it doesn't even feel like legit, really. But as Argay brought up, it's the small changes that are going to make it easier for Blizzard to balance in the future. And he goes into pretty good detail as to why.
I think they're hoping for a domino effect. Like for example, right now, what I call it's quad DPS. You get Baptiste, Zenyatta, and then Hanzo Mei. And then you put down the disc, no one needs to care about healing, and then you just spam. But now, with this D.Va change, if someone is playing D.Va, Zen might not be the pick anymore, but instead you might want to go for the Mercy, and then you go with the Ashe. So it might actually, this might still be enough to change the meta. But the problem with these tiny nerfs is that Blizzard takes so much time to introduce changes. But at the same time, if they would go for hardcore nerfs on Sigma and Orisa and Baptiste and Mei, then it might be too much, and then it's gonna make for another meta that everyone hates. So I feel like they just kind of have to take it slow here.
We have seen this a little bit post BlizzCon though, that we've seen smaller patches with pretty major changes in them, but not anything drastic. And like Argay said, Blizzard have a lot more control over the meta and their own agendas when they balance slower instead of major changes that can sweep across the board and change stuff up. But as Crow highlights here, big sweeping changes don't really change up that much. Sure, you may get completely new heroes in the meta, but the reason why all of these new metas feel oppressive and just awful to play is exactly the same, regardless of the heroes involved.
And whenever you have turbulent waters where it's, muddy water, well, if you take a glass of it and set it down, the turbulent waters will settle, the dirt will go to the bottom and everything becomes clear again. That's kind of like meta. It doesn't matter how much you change it. It doesn't matter if they did wide balancing changes, like crazy changes right now, and everything would be chaos. It would still settle down eventually, like you said. So the only advantage doing gigantic changes gives you is you get a better sense of what makes the hero balanced, because you can see the extreme of extreme left and extreme right. All right, so now we can find a point in between that, and you can make these. You'll learn a lot more about balancing when you make these big changes. But Blizzard has a lot to worry about, including Overwatch League. And I think that's a really big concern. And they can't have... They could have chaos, but essentially people will find the best strategy anyways and go with it. So they're just trying to, instead of going something chaotic where you can't really predict what's going to happen, if you go slower, if the goal is to have, let's just say, 3 metas to be optional. Let's say we want dive to be optional, we want Orisa Sigma with double shield to be possible, and then, I don't know, let's say double sniper is possible as well. Just throwing something else out there. The way to get all of these things to be equal is to be, this fine-grained type of balance.
I think this goes into nicely another reason why Sigma has as many problems as he does. Blizzard may not want to touch him, simply put, because they changed a lot of the barrier tanks in the game previously. Orisa was nerfed in this patch, sure, but the issue with that I find is that Orisa was far too good on her own, and she didn't have her barrier nerfed, it was just the effect of her own Fortify. Whereas the common complaint that I see from Sigma isn't his damage or his utility really, it's the health that his barrier has. So that might be a reason that Blizzard may not necessarily want to touch this at all, because they already kind of screwed with barriers a little bit already. But like I said, Blizzard were quite comfortable to go after Orisa again, because like I said, in a vacuum, Orisa is incredibly strong. If you pair her up with a D.Va, if you pair her up with a Zarya, a Roadhog, she's still always fairly strong. She just reaches a pinnacle when she's paired with Sigma. That's like the ultimate companionship there. But for Sigma, it's not necessarily the same, which is another issue that this hero has. Sigma in a vacuum is incredibly strong, but if you pair a Sigma up with a Reinhardt, with a Roadhog, with a D.Va, with any of the other tanks in the game that aren't Orisa, he isn't incredibly strong. He isn't oppressive. In fact, it's quite easy to deal with him if you're good enough. And this is a very common thing in stuff like Diamond and Platinum where I play at the moment. Very rarely do I see Orisa and Sigma play together, but I do see a lot of Sigma with Reinhardt, with Zarya, with Roadhog, with Wrecking Ball, the synergies that don't really pay off the same way. So Orisa's really good with everyone, therefore she's overtuned in every state, on her own, with Sigma, with any other tank to an extent. Sigma isn't the same. Sigma is only really strong when he's playing with Orisa. So basically, nerfing Sigma would make him worse with Orisa, sure, and make him worse on his own, but it would make him awful with heroes like Roadhog or Zarya. And that synergy is important. Crow highlights this as well.
A good example is Zarya, right? I think that's like the perfect example. Like Zarya within goats, pretty good. Zarya outside goats, what are you doing? Right, like the hero had tremendous synergy within goats, but outside of it, you have a lot of issues. And like you said, for D.Va as well, she's a good third tank, but she doesn't provide enough tank when there's only 2 required. This could be a way to deal with that, just to give some alternatives to Sigma. If the only time you can run Sigma is with Sigma or Orisa, and you nerf Sigma, then he becomes even more useless outside of that duo. When we're stuck because of a combination, like because of a synergy, that's a very tough. You have to start going about balance pretty carefully, and at that point, I think you have to start. I don't like using the term rework, but you need to start changing a little more drastically, and you need to change like 2 or 3 parts of the hero at the same time.
But I do want to highlight my problem personally with how Blizzard are approaching Sigma, and this was made evident with the 3-2-1 post that Jeff Kaplan put out recently. The whole idea of 3-2-1 was to have one tank, so Jeff Kaplan obviously brings up all of the off tanks in the game. He mentions Zarya, he mentions Roadhog, he mentions D.Va. He does not mention Sigma. Blizzard don't see Sigma as an off tank, but they don't see him as a main anchor tank either. They see him as a hybrid in a similar sense to how they see Wrecking Ball. It's a similar approach. Now this may seem rather innocent, but because Blizzard don't approach Sigma as the off tank that he is and how he is played, they don't balance around that in particular. Because he's neither a main tank or an off tank, he's not good enough really to be a main tank, but he's far too good to be an off tank, and that is all based around his barriers. Crow goes into more detail here.
Because yeah, like what is his role? If you make him a primary tank, like do you have to take away damage? Do you have to take away something else? Do you make him better as an off tank? Well, how does, Sigma work with Reinhardt? How does Sigma work with these other heroes more often now? Like, do you make his shield better? But his shield's not supposed to be, it's high HP but very low recharge. Like when you start bringing in synergies, that's when we start having issues with balance, because like goats, right? That's the predominant thing where it's like, it's not goats. The reason why they couldn't nerf goats was because it was like 3 or 4 ways that the whole group synergized together, and to nerf any one of these synergies would make the hero useless alone, and you're just trying to attack goats like through a really shitty method. Like, you're just like, oh, that's sticking out, let's just lop that off, and it's like, that doesn't solve the issue. You're just trying to see what you can grasp. So whenever you have to deal with these synergies, that's when we have to start changing, because it's a complex thing. It's like more than one thing, like it's 2 or 3 things together. Well, then we have to change 2 or 3 things together to try to make the hero useful in multiple aspects still, but weaker with, X synergy. And that may be outside of the 6-week patch cycle that we hope for. Like, it's a complex problem, so it's going to take more time to do it gracefully. And I'd rather have them do it gracefully, and we are stuck with what we have right now because we know how to deal with it right now, than to make a hesitant change and essentially, they could do something to make all off tank shit, and then we're still stuck with like Ryan Orisa, and that's all we have to run from now on.
There are plenty of reasons why Blizzard haven't touched Sigma yet, and I feel all of them are worth bearing in mind. I don't want this video to be like Blizzard shouldn't nerf Sigma. They most definitely should. He is far too strong in this situation. But hopefully from this video you can understand some of the challenges that Blizzard face and why they aren't just going to absolutely tank him. They don't want Sigma to be trashed here, but the strength of this hero isn't dictated by him alone, it's dictated by his synergies. Sigma, when you're pairing him with a Reinhardt, is worse than average, but he's still fine. He's not an overpowered hero in that situation, right? When you get into the higher tiers of Master and Grandmaster and the pro scene, that synergy with Orisa becomes intolerable to the point that you just cannot run anything else, and that is a big problem that Blizzard really have to try and work out. But when it comes to the small, boring patches, I've seen them being called, according to Crow, it's the right way to go about balancing the game in the future, but the frequency needs to be turned right up for these patches.
I would rather have patches every month and a half. Like what the patch they did this month, this PTR patch, this should be happening every 2 months. And you have to patch in a game's life cycle early on, and I'm talking like the first 3-5 years. You kind of have to patch often because you got to make a lot of changes. You kind of got to not shake things up, but you have to figure out, what makes the game balanced. Where can you change things? They also have to gauge how the community has to respond to certain changes, stuff like that. So I think they need to patch more often, and something little like this more often is, I think it's a good way to go. We'll see what they do going forward.
And that's everything that I wanted to go over today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Before we finish, like I said at the start of the video, I wanted to shout out HyperX. We have been working with them for quite some time. We've done some amazing stuff with them in the past. And I did want to highlight the headsets. Both myself and Miska used the mice and keyboards too. Regardless of your budget and preference, there's definitely going to be a headset for you. I use the Cloud Flight, which is the wireless headset, but I also have the Cloud Mix, which I use sort of specifically for traveling when I'm out and about at the gym, those kind of areas, but I can also attach it to my PC or my laptop via Bluetooth to play games with it too. Battery life is pretty spectacular, but if you want something more straightforward and a bit more budget friendly, the Cloud Alpha headsets are always good. A lot of the pros in the Overwatch League and in stuff like CSGO do use this headset, so regardless of what you're looking for, definitely keep an eye out and we'll let you know if any deals are happening. Thank you guys for watching, take care, we'll see you next time.